The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Perhaps you'd never even heard of an epidemiologist before this pandemic. Well, today, their expertise has become the stuff of everyday conversation. Tonight, we hear from 3 practitioners about where we're at and what it's been like to suddenly take center stage during this pandemic. Also, health and science policy expert Timothy Caulfield offers something of a salve for our trying times with his new book. It's called Relax, Dammit, and it's all about how to reduce everyday anxiety. It's Wednesday, January 6th, and that's ahead on the agenda. Tracking the who, why, where of disease and contagion wasn't always a rock star type profession. But in the midst of a global pandemic, that's what it's become. The field of epidemiology and its practitioners, epidemiologists, almost overnight had to step up to a major role in this public health crisis, analyzing and explaining the spread of COVID-19 to a stunned public. A tall order that's ongoing and that brings to our airwaves tonight, in the nation's capital, there's Raywat Deonandan, epidemiologist and associate professor at the University of Ottawa's Faculty of Health Sciences. In the downtown core of our provincial capital, Susie Hota, medical director of infection prevention and control and an infectious disease specialist at the University Health Network. And in East York, Ashley Chute, infectious disease epidemiologist at the University of Toronto's Dalla School of Public Health. And I'm so grateful to get the 3 of you away from your normal jobs to do this extra job that you have now all discovered you have to do during the time of a global pandemic because, well, let's face it, I'm guessing that probably a year ago, 90% of Ontarians never mind couldn't spell epidemiology. They didn't know what an epidemiologist did for a living, but we sure do now. So let's get a better understanding. Let's start there and get a better understanding of that. Susie, tell us what your days are like. What are your responsibilities?
Well, my job really entails trying to prevent healthcare-associated infections, tracking infections, and in the context of a pandemic, really being prepared to respond to something like this, an emerging infectious disease that can affect both hospitalized patients as well as those out in the community. My days are very diverse. I have a lot of meetings in which we're doing planning and response, going through response measures within the hospital. I play a role within the region to try and coordinate efforts within hospitals in responding to the pandemic. I review cases that come up within the hospital of COVID-19 and exposures, and a lot of time is spent on outbreak management, which now is beyond just the hospital. We're also now helping long-term care homes that are in significant outbreaks of COVID-19. So it's really a range of things that happen day to day.
Ashley, how do you see your mission?
So I'm an infectious disease epidemiologist and a mathematical modeler. So before the pandemic, I was working on communicable diseases and how they spread. And when COVID came, I pivoted to work on COVID because, that's sort of what I'm trained to do. But I'm a researcher. So most of what I do is around projections and, trying to understand what's happening in the population, looking at the data that we have to try and understand the epidemic trajectory, to try and think about, what sort of interventions should we have in place when and for how long. And, as the pandemic has progressed, I've had roles in terms of, serving on committees at both the provincial as well as the federal level. Again, thinking about the epidemiologic data and how we can use that to try and guide the response.
And Raywat, how about you?
Well, I call myself a global health epidemiologist, so I look at a variety of data sources and fold in some political science and economics and history to answer questions about inequities in health around the world. I'm not an infectious disease modeler like Dr. Chute or a clinician like Dr. Hota, so my application of my skills is limited in this pandemic, but I think I'm a pretty good communicator and a pretty good teacher, so I've been focusing on accessing and articulating the science to people who do not have that expertise. That's my role in this emergency, I think.
And Ashley, does it go without saying that you are working more hours and you have more intense responsibilities since last March 13th.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been working on COVID since January, and it's been a it's been a bit of a whirlwind because I am doing my job and also, talking to people. There's this huge interest in terms of media, so that's sort of on top of the day job that I'm doing.
I'm going to pick up on that a little more in just a bit, but Susie Hoda, maybe you can pick up the story there. How much more intense, difficult, long are your days now compared to, say, a year ago?
Oh, it's a completely different world. I'd say, on average, it's a 12 to 14-hour days of intense work now. It's picking up on areas that I haven't been involved in before, long-term care, regional coordination, the media side of things, and communications, which is really also important, and also no weekends. I mean, it's been very intense.
Okay, let's go to the media thing. Raywat, do I assume that, let's say, over the last 9 months, you've been doing a lot more media interviews than you had, let's say, in the previous 9 months?
It's well over 1,000 interviews now in the past 9 months. And before that, maybe 5 or 6 in a year. And I'm on parental leave right now. So all this interrupts my diaper changing schedule. Right? So it's a bit of chaos in my life.
I'm trying to do the math on this. Literally, I mean, if you've done 1,000 interviews over the last 9 months, we're talking like 3, 4 a day.
Oh, easily. I get about 20 requests a day. I accept maybe 6. And some days it's, I feel more active and I'll do more.
Susie Hoda, your life the same?
During times when I could accommodate it, I would try to do 2 or 3 interviews a day. Now it's getting more and more difficult, so I do what I can. But definitely it's a lot more time commitment, but worth it.
Ashley, how about you?
Yeah, I would say similar. I mean, it waxes and wanes depending on what the hot topic of the day is. But yeah, I mean, if I think I could, if I had the time, you could spend your entire day in, 12-hour days just doing the communication side of things. So it can be incredibly overwhelming and really hard to, because we do have day jobs. So it can be hard to strike that balance between wanting to communicate.
Exactly. That's what I was going to ask, because don't get me wrong. We're thrilled that you're spending as much time with us as you are. But I must say, I also feel a little bit guilty taking you away from the work that you're sort of trained and really supposed to be doing. Ashley, how do you manage that balance?
Sometimes better than others. For me, turning off my email and just sort of, not checking it for a few hours is my way of getting some focus in and trying to get work done. But again, I think it depends on what's going on. I think sometimes it's really, really important to be available and to have those conversations with people, more so than other times. And so, if it's a topic or an issue that is really important to me, I will make the time. But sometimes I definitely do need to sort of scale back and really focus on the work that I'm trying to accomplish.
Now, for Raywat, I can understand this. He's an associate professor at a university, and educating the public is obviously part of his mission. But Susie Hoda, I would not have thought that public education was necessarily part of your mission when you first got your job at UHN. So how different is the job today compared to then?
Well, yeah, it's always been a bit of an expectation that there would be some public, communication when you do the kind of work that I do. Outbreaks occur. You have to be transparent about what happens within those outbreaks. It affects the whole public as well. Hospitals are part of the public and perform an important service to the public. So it is a bit of an expectation. This degree of public communication, maybe not, but I think many of us feel that it's an important thing that we're obligated to do and would like to do to try and help inform the public.
Now, we know that politicians, when they do interviews, get media training. That's just part of the gig. And you folks are on TV and doing radio interviews and newspapering and so on far more than probably 95% of the politicians in this country right now. Maybe not the health minister, maybe not the premiers, but certainly, way more than most average politicians. So I got to ask, Raywat, did the University of Ottawa take you aside at some point and say, you know what, if you're going to be on TV this much, let's get you some training?
No. However, we do have those facilities available to us. I just never took advantage of them. And the thing about being a professor is you lecture all the time. You're used to engaging with people with questions and trying to meet them at their level of understanding. So this should not be a big leap for people who engage in public education on a day-to-day basis to engage with media and the general population.
Ashley, how about you? At any point, did Dalalana pull you aside and say, let's get you some training if you're going to be on TV this much?
No, no. And I mean, to be perfectly honest, before this year, I think I've spoken to a reporter once. This is not a natural thing for me to do. And it certainly has been a learning curve because, yeah, it's not, I'm much more comfortable sort of sitting at a computer and crunching numbers, not really having conversations with people, particularly live conversations. That to me is something that still strikes a lot of fear in my heart.
Well, what's the most unpleasant part about doing all these interviews?
I think the inability to correct yourself. I think, as a scientist, I like to be really precise and really clear. And, you don't always get the message right. And that can be challenging. And sometimes you want to rewind and sort of have a do-over. And you can't always do that.
Susie Hoda, any media training for you?
I think when I started this job, I got a slide deck from our public affairs department on communications, but really outside of that, no formal training in this.
So you three are just naturals. Well, that's good. It's good to be a natural. Nice to hear. All right, we do have to talk about the other side of this, though, because the reality is that when you take a prominent public role in public education, as you three have, you are going to run into people who don't necessarily like the message that you are trying to convey. And Rewat, why don't we start with you? I don't know how much you are on social media or what your email inbox looks like after you do your TV hits, but tell us about some of the, what are some of the less savory things you get told?
Right. You get called a lot of names, and sometimes they go for the lowest hanging fruit. For me, it's my skin color. For I'm sure my other colleagues here, it's their gender. And oftentimes it's people lashing out of pain, and they're not looking for reasoned discourse. They're looking to hurt you, looking for conflict. I tend not to engage. Having said that, the vast majority of feedback is positive. And so it's easy to focus on those handful of negative responses, but we really have to look at the entirety of the engagement and recognize that most Canadians are actually grateful for these attempts. But to talk about the negative for a second, occasionally it does descend into threats of violence. And that makes going outside sometimes a little scary because I do get recognized now, and my spouse gets very nervous about those incidents. Like, is it going to be a positive event, or is it going to lead to something requiring a call to the police? It hasn't gotten that far yet. I'm sure some of my colleagues it has gotten pretty bad.
Could you give us a ratio on, positive to negative?
It used to be about 50 to 1, but it's gone to about 100 to 1. I mean, the positive has really increased in the last little bit, which is really inspiring to see.
Good. Susie Hoda, how about you? What are you getting on social media or in your emails?
I think it's a lot of the same. The majority of what I get is positive. That's really reassuring and nice to see. But I have had some unusual messages. I've had some threatening messages as well. And, it's disconcerting. And it does make you kind of second guess sometimes whether what you're doing is right. And usually I'm quickly able to kind of recognize that that's the minority of people who respond that way. And then there's also that sort of more passive or difficult to sort out bullying that can happen on social media. That takes its toll because it's more subtle, but it eats away at you a little bit. So it's not always easy doing the media, but I try to remind myself that the majority of the comments are positive.
I want to walk a tightrope here because on the one hand, I don't want to be overly sensationalistic about this, but on the other hand, I can imagine there are some people watching or listening saying, well, it's probably not that bad. So maybe let's be specific here. Can you tell us the kind of thing that you might receive that you would find disturbing?
I have received one message that told me, I wish you would burn. And, comments like that. Nothing that was a personal threat, but certainly threatening sounding. A lot of name calling, things like that. Those are the worst of the messages. A lot of the other messages are just, people probably airing their frustrations at this point in the pandemic.
Ashley, how about you? What's your experience?
I've had some unpleasant experiences, most of it on social media in terms of, people questioning your motives and this idea that, we're in positions of privilege and we're somehow benefiting from lockdowns, which, is kind of absurd. But, I think, as Raywa said, a lot of this is coming from people who are hurting and who are in pain. I think there's a bit of a dichotomy, or they're the actual trolls who are really just there to stir up dissent. But there are people who I've had, emails from who, if you actually engage with them, it's because, they're in pain. They've suffered through this pandemic, and they don't entirely understand what's going on. And so some of those conversations can actually be fruitful. But again, it takes time to engage with people, and it can be challenging.
And just so I'm clear, if you do engage with someone who, never mind the haters or the trolls, but if you do engage with someone who seems to be lashing out because they genuinely don't understand, or they're feeling pain for whatever reason, if you engage with them, are you able to sort of cut through and eventually get to a better place?
Sometimes. I mean, sometimes you just need to leave it. But there certainly have been examples where, I think you sort of explain, that this is not, there's no good options during this pandemic, and we're sort of doing the best that we can. And, this is not a personal attack on, trying to ruin someone's livelihood.
Okay, moving on. I want to read a quote here. This is from the Ottawa Citizen last fall. The president of the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada, Alejandro Adam, who said, as we think about what it means to build back better, one takeaway seems obvious. Let's leverage this mass science lesson to foster a broad-based culture of science literacy. If one legacy of COVID-19 is a nation where people feel better informed and more capable of grasping scientific issues, we'll be in a stronger position to thrive in the post-pandemic world. A scientifically literate society is better positioned to confront far-reaching problems, from global warming to the next pandemic. Okay, let's pick up on that. Raywa, how much of our general scientific illiteracy as a society do you think is at the root of a lot of what you have to encounter in your day?
Oh, so much of it, absolutely. And the quote is correct. We have a window of opportunity here. We have to take advantage of it. When I first started writing about this pandemic, hoping to explain some of the science, I was stunned by how low the level of understanding was, but how it's the lowest hanging fruit, really, I'm grasping for, explaining what a virus is, explaining what transmission and infection are. So I would like to see us reinvest in literacy across the board, not just science literacy, but all kinds of literacy. But in terms of science literacy, it's not even the complicated stuff that needs to be addressed. Understanding why we need a control group, understanding the levels of evidence, why a randomized controlled trial is better than expert opinion, understanding that scientists speak in equivocating terms, like I'm unsure of this and this needs more work, and that's better than someone on YouTube expressing certainty. So that level of understanding of the nature of science can really do a lot of good in helping the population navigate misinformation from true information.
Since you are an educator, I should ask you this follow-up question. Do you have a theory as to why, as a society, we appear to be, generally speaking, so scientifically illiterate?
There's a number of factors that have shown their face in the last few years, among them a general culture of mistrust of authority, of government, of media, of the elite, of which we are members apparently. And there's also social media that has potentiated and accelerated these fringe beliefs into the mainstream. And of course, disinformation agents who have taken advantage of those trends to prise apart those divisions even further. So those are three of the major factors, but they're not the entirety of all the factors. I think as a society, we've taken our eye off the ball of what it means to strengthen the resilience of a common citizen, and we do so by empowering them with critical thinking skills.
Susie Hota, I guess the more optimistic, positive interpretation of the time in which we're living is that it could open the door to all of us being more scientifically literate. On your best days, I'm sure you hope for that. What are your realistic expectations about this?
I really do think that this is going to help us in the end. I guess I do a lot of education around infection prevention and control on a daily basis within the hospital. And even then, with a bunch of people who are in healthcare, I have to repeat messages over and over again for people to really get it and let it sink in sometimes. So, I think this is all part of the process. And I'm hoping that after going through this for such a long time, the public picks up some of these things and recognizes the importance of staying informed on the science behind what we do, and maybe it will even shift the way that we educate people, in our educational curriculum. So I think a lot of positive things will come out of this pandemic when it comes to understanding science.
Ashley, I'll make the comparison to politics again, because they tell cabinet ministers when they're media training them, only when you have repeated a message 500 times and you are so sick to death of hearing your own voice saying it yet again, that is the moment where it's only beginning to penetrate the consciousness of most of your audience. Have you found yourself in similar circumstances during this?
Absolutely. And I feel optimistic about the scientific literacy question, because there has been such a huge appetite for this. And it's really challenged me to try and figure out how to explain these complex concepts in a way that is relatable. And I certainly have been learning a lot, but it actually brings me a sense of optimism, because people are really interested in this, and they're really interested in learning. And sometimes it can feel frustrating to have to explain something over and over and over again. But again, I think that's good for us as science communicators to try and understand, how do we get these concepts across? But also, I remember in 2011 going to watch the movie Contagion with some of my epidemiologist friends and laughing, because there's a scene where Kate Winslet's the epidemiologist, and she's explaining the concept of a basic reproduction number. And we laughed because we were like, there would never, in a pandemic, people wouldn't be interested in learning these sort of obscure scientific concepts. And here we are in 2021, and people are really into understanding the data. We talk about the reproduction number. I talk about that with my dad. It's become sort of day-to-day language, which I think is really, really great. And I hope that we can use this momentum to make sure that we improve science literacy going forward.
How did you like the fact the epidemiologist played by Kate Winslet was one of the heroes of a movie instead of maybe portrayed the opposite way?
I think that was awesome. And I hope that that's what comes out at the end of this pandemic as well.
Let's get into some exploration here about pandemic planning and pandemic response is something that has been, well, certainly in the province of Ontario, a fairly academic discussion on this level. I mean, yes, we had SARS, yes, we had H1N1, yes, we had West Nile, but nothing like this before. So I'd like to get a better understanding. Susie Hoda, why don't you start us off on this, of all of what you have believed and taught and understood up until, I guess, a year ago this time, versus the reality of what it's actually been. How different?
I think a lot of the principles are there, but when you look at most pandemic plans, they have maybe a part of a chapter that's dedicated to wellness and resiliency and supporting people through a pandemic, and maybe part of a chapter that's on risk communication and the importance of communicating. I think if you were to rewrite these, we're going to have at least half of our pandemic plans dedicated to these really important aspects of managing a pandemic, because I think we all underestimated just what the impacts are of going through such a long, drawn-out process, and with all the different ups and downs and stages of it, and how that actually takes its toll on everybody going through it.
Ray Watt, how about you? Academic expectation versus the real thing?
I think there are two big flaws of the pandemic plans. First is that they expected rational behavior on all the actors, and we've not seen rational behavior across the board. And second is, in the communications aspect of it, no one anticipated the burden and the barriers to proper communications, like having to explain to people and convince them that a real thing is a real thing, and like having to battle active disinformation agents actively trying to slow your pandemic response. Nobody anticipated that, because we didn't anticipate social media or the political divisions of the day. And so I think there's going to be some frantic rewriting of pandemic planning in the next few months.
Ashley, how about you on that?
I mean, for me, I think one of the biggest gaps is, understanding human behavior and, and sort of those ups and downs in terms of how people are willing to go along with, the things that we're asking of them. And similarly, the length of this, it's hard to imagine that this has only been a year. It feels like a lifetime. And so I think a lot of those plans are really focused on that, early days, what do you do? How do you get systems up and running? But, questions around schools and, how do we operate a school in the midst of a pandemic? I don't think those sorts of questions were really addressed to the degree that we would have liked. And, we're learning that now.
Susie, one of the things that we have learned, and that has emerged over the course of the last week and a half or so, is that there have been many, not just one, we all know the most high-profile case, but there have been many politicians across this country who have said one thing, urged us to do one thing, and then done another. And I wonder, from your point of view, how much more difficult does that make your job in getting the message across when political leaders don't reflect the values that you're preaching?
I think it's really important to actually highlight these things because role modeling is incredibly powerful when you're trying to manage a pandemic. And we just talked about behavior change and how, we had underestimated the effects of human behavior on how a pandemic would roll out. A lot of that's determined by what people are seeing and the role modeling that's happening out there. So I do think that, it has made things a little bit harder. It can undermine public health messaging when you see these kinds of instances. And we're just going to have to continue to remind people that everybody's actions count.
Ashley, can I get you on that as well?
Yeah, I mean, if we have leaders who are supposed to be, heading this pandemic response, who are not listening to their own messaging, talking about issues with communication, I mean, that's the ultimate. We can't have people saying one thing and doing another. And, I'm amongst the people who feel incredibly frustrated. Like, now is not the time to be telling people to make sacrifices and then, jetting off for a vacation. It's frustrating. And it's sort of, I think, that the height of poor communication and poor leadership.
Ray Watt, your view on that?
We're in the midst of a crisis of trust. This is the crux of much of our civic issues right now, to be honest. And you can't combat a pandemic, a public health emergency, without both political will and public buy-in. And public buy-in is only possible if the leaders show that they're trustworthy. That lack of trust bleeds down to the scientists and to the media as well. So it pollutes everything that we're trying to do. We can move mountains if you have public trust, but we don't have it anymore.
Let me raise another issue with the three of you, which is when you live this as much as you do, I mean, everybody's living it, but not everybody's living it professionally as you do. How do you get away from it? Susie Hoda, can you ever get away from this when you just need to clear your head and get away?
Small breaks. That's really what I do. I try to pepper my day with small breaks, whether it's actually making the decision to not bring my lunch so that I can purchase a lunch and take a break from my email. All of that's really important, and making sure that there's balance in life, exercising, spending a little bit of time focusing on what's important to keep you going.
Ray Watt, how do you do it?
Well, you try to watch things like good science fiction TV, but then you catch yourself like, oh my God, they're not wearing masks. They're standing too close together. It's hard to pull yourself out of that reality. And I live with a family doctor who's my spouse, and so this is all we talk about as well. It's okay, though. I mean, this is what we're supposed to do, I feel. So I have to immerse myself in it in order to be thinking about it all the time and to be reflexive and responsive intellectually.
Well, since you've talked about your spouse, Ashley, who are you married to?
Yeah, no, I'm married to another epidemiologist, so we are sort of all COVID all the time.
Right. So how do you get away from it, if you ever do?
I mean, it's as Susie said, small breaks, turning off the internet every once in a while and just sort of forcing yourself to read a book or watch TV or, get outside, which is, challenging, but I think it's really important.
Good. Well, in our last few minutes here, I guess I should put the three of you to work doing what you do best, which is telling us how we're doing right now. So let's do a minute and a half to each of you. Susie Hoda, how's the province of Ontario doing right now?
Oh, I usually like to end interviews on a positive note, but unfortunately it's not so positive. We're not in a good place. The numbers are going up of cases every day. It seems like, we're at the point of the healthcare system, being potentially overwhelmed. As of this morning, we had 374 patients with COVID-related illness in ICUs in Ontario. We're at a really, really difficult point of this pandemic right now. And the one, I guess, silver lining is we're in the process of rolling out vaccine to individuals who are high priority. So I'm looking forward to that taking its effect, hopefully in upcoming months.
Ashley, what have you got to share with us about how we're doing?
I don't have anything sort of more positive to say. I think, this attempt to strike a balance between protecting our health and keeping our economy thriving has failed. We're not successful at either right now. at a certain point, we need to stop with the magical thinking and actually, commit to getting transmission under control. And then we can talk about, how our economy will recover.
Do we need a curfew to do that?
Honestly, at this point, I think we need to pull out all the stops. And if a curfew would help, I would support that.
So if the Premier of Ontario were to bring in a curfew, he wouldn't get any criticism from you?
No, not right now.
Okay. Ray Watt, how about you? How are we doing?
Well, look at all the numbers, right? So the test positivity rate, I think, is over 5% right now. Hospitalizations are up. ICU usage is up. Ventilator usage is up. We have a morgue in London that is over capacity, an overcapacity morgue. We have field hospitals opening in Burlington specifically for COVID. We have the wastewater analyses in places like Ottawa, where I live, showing increased transmission. We have a new variant coming from the UK that may find purchase in our community. Things do not look good. And these are not the signs of a society that has responded to a pandemic well. However, as noted, we do have the vaccine, and it's in our power to pull out all the stops to slow transmission, but also to accelerate the vaccine distribution. Those are our best bets to come out of this as safely and as quickly as possible.
How do we accelerate the vaccine distribution?
You get more. Number one. Number two, you strategically deploy it. So you can get herd effects without having to reach herd immunity if it's given to the right people. And right now, it's a little mystifying to me what the rate limiting steps are to proper vaccine distribution. It seems that we're going to centralize centers like hospitals and relying upon them to distribute it, whereas we have existing vaccine distribution programs like public health units that know how to do this well. So I don't think we're fully leveraging our assets and our expertise as much as we could.
Susie Hoda, last word to you. If we want to break community spread, community transmission, which is the biggest problem right now, some people are saying give it to the kids because they're the worst spreaders, as opposed to the people who live in seniors' residences and so on. What's your view on that?
Well, these vaccines have not been studied in pediatric populations. So I don't think that's the right thing for us to be doing right now. I think, it comes down to the same messages we've been saying from the start. Everyone has to do their part in terms of masking, distancing, not having contacts right now as much as possible. And we let vaccine roll out through the population. It's going to take all of that to stop this now.
Epidemiologist. Epidemiologist. I can spell it. I know what it is. Thanks in part to you three. We thank Raywat Deyanandan, Susie Hoda, and Ashley Chute for coming on to TVO tonight, as they so often have appeared in the media and helping us out with this. You be safe, you three. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Decisions. We make them all day long, and whether we realize it or not, constantly weighing pros and cons to make those choices can be exhausting. Timothy Caulfield knows a good bit about analyzing and weighing data to draw conclusions, and his new book may offer some respite. It's called Relax, Dammit, a user's guide to the age of anxiety. He's a professor of health law and science policy at the University of Alberta. And Timothy Caulfield joins us now from Edmonton, Alberta. It's great to have you on our program again. Tim, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Not at all. How many decisions does the average person make in a day?
Well, depending on what study that you look at and how you kind of define decisions, it could be as many as thousands. Some of these aren't very conscious, but bottom line, hundreds for sure.
Are people, when they feel stressed, do they tend to be more stressed than the circumstances would actually warrant them being?
I think that is the case, and I think there's good evidence to back that up. And we have to be careful, again, when we look at the evidence here, because people feel stressful for different reasons and different circumstances, impact different people in a variety of ways. But the bottom line is we live in an incredibly chaotic information environment, and I think there's a good body of evidence to suggest that chaotic information environment is having an impact on our level of stress and our anxiety.
Well, you could certainly argue that feeling more stressful in the middle of a global pandemic where, you may have friends or family who are COVID positive, or who knows, even fighting death. I mean, that's a reasonable thing, isn't it?
Yeah, Steve, I think this is a really important point. Feeling anxious, feeling stressed is a completely normal human reaction. In fact, it's biologically wired, and so I think we need to be careful also not to overinterpret those kinds of feelings. That's how humans should respond.
A lot of your books talk about how bad humans are at assessing risk, which you would think after millions of years we'd be pretty good at by now, but apparently not. Why are we not good at it?
Yeah, humans are terrible at it, Steve. We're terrible at assessing risk, and there's a bunch of reasons for that. One, we have this really strong negativity bias, and we're sort of hardwired to respond more strongly to negative news than positive news, and that makes biological sense, right? I mean, for most of human history, that's a good predisposition, right? You want to remember the bad stuff. There's interesting research that shows, for example, that humans respond much stronger to negative headlines than positive headlines. Negative headlines outperform positive ones. That's not going to surprise you. You're in the news. But that's just one example of how that can play out. In addition to that, there's been a lot of really interesting research to show how negative news on social media also results in a stronger reaction, and some really interesting recent research that highlights how, in the context of COVID, actually, Steve, that highlights how negative social media posting that is often incorrect, is misinformation, causes us to be more stressed out, and interestingly may cause us to post more, right? So we have this horrible cycle that starts to form around how we're interpreting the content that we're bombarded with all the time.
I think you've just summed up the last 4 years in the United States in the last 1 minute of this program, but okay. Let's do this. I'd like to go through sort of a typical day that people watching us or listening to us right now may be experiencing, and talk about the choices that they have, the decisions that they make in the course of a day. And I set this up by reminding myself that Barack Obama once said, I've got suits that are only in 2 colors, and I've got ties that are only in 2 colors, and I only wear white shirts, because I know I've only got so many good decisions to make during the course of a day, and I don't want to waste them on picking clothes. So with that in place, Timothy, let's do a bunch of true or false questions here. Number 1, waking up earlier is better for you than waking up later. True or false?
False. False. In fact, that's a really good example of how there's this pop culture belief that it's always better to wake up early. And you have all of these really good examples that are out there, these anecdotes, captains of industry, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, who all get up ridiculously early and have created this myth that it's always good to do that. It's almost like this noble thing to do. You're going to be more productive. You're going to be more creative, when in reality, the science doesn't back that up at all. We each have our own rhythm, and we should try as best as we can, given the circumstances of our life, to follow that rhythm.
They don't say that the late bird gets the worm, though, Timothy, but the science doesn't back that up, eh?
That's right, and isn't it? It's a great example of this embedded myth. This myth has been around for a very long time, and I think it's tied a little bit to this, this idea of this Protestant ethic around waking early. But really no evidence to support it. Okay, next one. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and we should never skip it. True or false? False. False. Now, this one's a little more complex, because I use this one in the book as an example of how the evidence is actually way messier than often portrayed. The evidence around, despite what we've heard over and over again, the evidence is actually less than clear on whether breakfast is good or bad. And by that, I mean by the impact it's going to have on how much you eat throughout the day. Weight loss is often tied to eating breakfast. But in fact, the evidence is less than clear. So you should really find a healthy rhythm that works for you. And that's relevant for when you wake up, but it's also relevant with respect to whether you have breakfast or not. And a lot of our belief in breakfast comes from Kellogg, the cereal magnate. He really, his advertising really helped fuel this idea that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Okay, next one. If you can, it's better for parents to drive their children to school than to let them walk. True or false? False. False. That one's an easy one, and I think the evidence is actually pretty definitive on this. And I use that one in the book. That's a really good example of how fear can drive sort of an irrational choice. And also it's a really good example of how our intentions often don't match what the evidence actually says. Because of course our intention is we want what is best for our kids. And Steve, what do you think the number one reason that parents don't let their kids walk to school?
Well, they're fearful of their safety or something like that.
That's exactly right. It's exactly right. There's a relatively good body of evidence to suggest that stranger danger, the fear of the man in the white van drives this, and the chance of your child being abducted or having some kind of criminal activity happen to them is so vanishingly rare, so incredibly rare that you can categorize it as not going to happen. On the other side of the equation is the clear benefit that kids could get from walking to school: exercise, a little bit of independence, perhaps socializing with with their friends. And Steve, even 20 minutes of quiet and peace, that can be beneficial also. So you have these clear benefits weighed against this fear, and it also really highlights how our availability bias. This fear is so horrific that any headline that confirms that fear is going to be remembered, and it's going to drive our decision.
Well, since I'm on such a roll here with asking questions that almost always end with false, let's try another one here. Cycling, generally speaking, is more dangerous than walking. True or false?
So, false, but it's close. You see me hesitating there.
Yes.
I think the better way to frame that, if I could, is that it's not hugely. There's not a huge difference here, and that also goes with driving your car. And it's, again, hard to measure this, and there are clearly dangers associated with cycling, especially if the infrastructure isn't there. But if you look at the numbers, walking probably is a little bit safer, but we're talking about a risk, an order of magnitude that is tiny, right? It's tiny. And so this shouldn't be driving your decision about whether to ride your bike or not. Now, listen, it's very context specific. Every city's different. Every infrastructure is different. But the reality is it's much more complex than often portrayed.
Sure, but there is this presupposition, probably mostly among non-cyclists, that cycling, particularly in a city, is an incredibly dangerous thing to do. Where does that come from?
That's right. And again, this a little bit of our confirmation biases. And the other thing that people think is, cyclists are horrible and dangerous and they're, interfering. There's actually been studies that have shown that in general, cyclists obey the rules more than drivers. I know that's hard to believe. They follow the rules more than drivers. And in addition to that, when they are breaking the rules, they usually break the rules for their own personal safety, whereas cars break the rules because of time. They want to do something that's going to get them to where they're going faster. So the reason that we think this is because we remember that maniac driver, cyclist, right? The ones hopping, the single speed guys hopping the curbs and stuff. That's the one we remember, right? And there's also this really fascinating research that shows that people think of cyclists as somehow they're free riders. The road is for cars, and look, they're driving by me. That can't be right. They should have to wait too. And so it causes people to get aggravated, even though there's all this evidence to back up how beneficial active commuting is, how beneficial it is, not just for the person who's doing it, but also for your community.
Next one, we should all be drinking a lot more water. True or false?
False. Unless you're thirsty. If you're thirsty, then you should be drinking. The evidence tells us that this myth, this idea that we're supposed to drink 8 glasses of water a day, has no real science behind it at all. You should just drink when you're thirsty. Thank you, evolution. But we have this huge industry that has now built up around this idea that we're supposed to drink all the time. We have special water. We have water bottles. We have a lot of fear mongering about tap water. You drink when you're thirsty, and in most places you can just drink tap water.
Let's see if I can get a true one on the record here. Cat naps during the day are a good thing. True or false?
Can I? I'm going to say mostly false. Sorry. And this one's unreal. This one's unreal because we live now in an era where everyone thinks napping is good for you. Now, look. The reason I hesitated so long is because there are circumstances when napping might be a good idea. If you are really tired and you need to be wakeful for something that's maybe you have a big presentation, maybe you have an athletic event, and you want to be ready to go for that. The problem with napping, despite what you hear in pop culture all the time, is that it can really interfere with your nighttime sleep, right? And so many of us have insomnia, or we're just not great sleepers. By the way, Steve, I'm one of those people. I'm not a great sleeper. And if you nap during the day, you can interfere with your nighttime sleep, right? If you are going to nap, it should be as short as possible, and it should be not close to when you're going to bed at night, right? So again, I think I'd categorize this, Steve, as the evidence is much messier, again, as often portrayed in pop culture, because right now naps are having a moment, right? It's portrayed as always good to nap, you're going to get all these benefits from it. And by the way, there is a little bit of evidence, correlational in nature, so we have to be careful not to overinterpret it, that long naps are actually bad for you. So again, the evidence much more complicated than often portrayed. Naps are not always good.
All right, let's do one more here in the hopes of finally getting to a true, but I got a feeling. Why do I have a feeling it's not going to happen? In our busy world, parents sometimes feel very guilty about the fact that they are spending, quote unquote, only quality as opposed to quantity time with their children, and they should feel guilty about that. True or false?
False. False. And again, I want to be careful here. This is complicated stuff. And that's actually one of the longer chapters in my book. And I found the literature absolutely fascinating. And I hope the readers find this fascinating too. Despite the incredible guilt that parents, and I'm a parent, and I have this guilt, I feel this guilt. So I'm speaking from experience. Despite the guilt that we don't spend enough time with our kids, humans today spend more time with their kids than ever before. Well, at least, since we've counted. So we're looking, let's say we'll go back 100, 150 years. Then because of this social pressure to do exactly that. And so that's number one. We are actually, despite this feeling, we're spending more time with our kids than we have in the past. And number two, there really isn't that much evidence to suggest that more is always better. I understand that you may want to spend more time with your kids. I enjoy spending time with my kids, but it's not going to have this huge necessarily benefit on your children, even though that's the reason that we're doing it. We have this profound guilt that we should be doing it. So again, be careful about how you interpret the social pressures that are out there. And if I could say one more thing, one of the reasons we feel this way is because of social comparison. Social media, there are all these unbelievably great parents out there, and they post about all their special events with their kids, and they're on the beach with their kids, they're going for a walk with their kids, they're playing a board game with their kids, and they're posting about it, and it makes us feel guilty. So I think this social comparison component to this story is also really important.
I suspect the pandemic has gone a long way to convince people they don't need to feel guilty about time with their kids anymore, because most of what I hear from parents these days is, I love my kids, but I've really had enough at this moment. Anyway, be that as it may, we move on. There are people who love to tell other people how busy they are. Busy braggers, I guess you'd call them. What does that sound like?
Busy bragging, good to hear from you. How you doing, Tim? I'm doing great, but so busy. And and you know what, Steve? Despite the fact that I researched this section, I researched time management for the book, I know the reality, I still do it. It's become this social tick that we have when we're communicating with people. We always say we're busy. And the interesting thing is it's kind of true in that we do feel busy. And this is what I really highlight in the book. We do feel busy. And that's partly because I think we carry our office around with us in our pockets, right? We can always be on email. We can always be on social media. So we always feel like there's something we could be doing. Layer on top of that, this busy brag kind of social norm that has emerged that says if you're not busy, if you don't feel busy, you're not, accomplishing enough, right? Feeling bored is horrible. You should never feel like you have leisure time. So we have that kind of social norm emerging out there. The reality is, in the aggregate, and there's a caveat here I want to come back to, in the aggregate, we have more free time now than we have for decades. For decades, right? We actually have more free time. Now, the big caveat is, look, I absolutely know there are sectors of the economy out there that are incredibly busy. There's single parents that maybe have 2 jobs, incredibly busy. So I'm talking about sort of, in the aggregate, and sort of an invitation to ask people, how busy are you really, right? And is it should you really feel this sort of guilt that you're not you're not working all the time.
No, we understand that particularly during a global pandemic that doctors, nurses, healthcare workers, first responders, people who are stocking the shelves of our supermarkets, we understand that they are busier and more occupied than normal. You're talking about generally speaking here. And okay, give us some advice here then. The next time you bump into somebody or you get onto an elevator and there's another person in the elevator, which almost never happens anymore, but okay, somebody says to you, "Are you busy?" Which is what people get asked, a dozen times a day. What's the right answer?
I think the right answer is if you if you are busy, say you're busy. But you know what? You probably aren't. So say, things are okay. It's the usual. So that's what I try to say now. It's funny though, because I even think about those in the book. I joke about those Christmas letters that everyone writes. And in those Christmas letters, everyone is so incredibly busy. They're sequencing the genome. They're plotting a trip to Mars. No one ever says, we didn't do much this year. Junior is spending 8 hours a day on social media. I've watched a lot of Netflix. It was a fun year. No one ever says that, right?
Well, let me pick up on that, Tim, because if there is one thing more people have done more of in the last 9 months, it's binge watch TV. What have you learned about the practice of binge watching TV over the past 9 months?
Steve, I'm glad you asked me that. I loved writing this part of the book. I found there's actually research on binging, which I didn't know until I started researching the book, and there's experts out there. So what I found is that, and I have bingers in this house, by the way. When you binge watch a TV show, you actually get less enjoyment out of it. Look, I appreciate it's hard to study this kind of phenomenon well, but bear with me. You get less enjoyment out of it as opposed to spreading it out. So if there's this show that you love, and if you binge it all in one day, you actually enjoy it less. And they've done studies where you don't remember it as well, and you can't do sort of a critical appraisal of the show as well as someone who has sort of parsed the show out over time. In addition to that, there are sort of some health concerns with binging. It's sedentary behavior. It's associated with not eating well. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why maybe you shouldn't, binge all the time. Maybe it's a treat. And by the way, I'm probably going to binge tonight, so I'm a hypocrite.
Well, then I've got to ask, what are you binge watching tonight?
You know what? Cobra Kai. Have you heard of this show, Cobra Kai? Our whole family loves it. It's a reimagining of the Karate Kid. Remember the Karate Kid? So maybe it's a little bit nostalgia for me. So they're revisiting all the characters right now. Super clever, kind of sweet, a little bit of edge.
If you want something completely the opposite, like not sweet, not for the whole family, Your Honor. I just started watching that. That is a crazy, intense, difficult show. But you got to be in a different kind of mood for that one. Okay, Tim, let's do this. We're going to do a quote from your book here. This is from Relax, Dammit. I realize that relying on evidence isn't the only way people make decisions, but I think that a journey through a typical day of decisions will allow us to recognize that more often than not, we can relax. It probably doesn't really matter as much as we think. In a world where information is increasingly twisted for commercial, ideological, and personal gain, finding a path to the objective truth on any topic, from toothpaste to toilet seats, can be difficult, but the path does exist, and finding it can be liberating. This, when I read that, it sort of reminded me of the former, I think she was a child psychologist, Barbara Coloroso, who used to give parenting advice and saying, if it's not life-threatening and it's not health-threatening, just let them do it. How do we find that path, though, to a more relaxing us?
Well, in the book, I really try to invite people to kind of ignore the noise, or watch that noise and enjoy the noise in a little bit more of a removed manner. There is so much noise out there, and we can usually ignore most of it and just focus on those science-informed basics. And so that really is what the book is an invitation to do, and I try to provide people with sort of the critical thinking skills to do that, and I do try to point people in the right direction. And look, as you know from the book, I don't try to tell people how they should lead their lives. And almost on the contrary, often the conclusion is, you know what, you should do what works for you, right? And ignore these pressures and this conflicting information that is constantly stressing us out.
It's tough on those of us who aren't scientists, though, because we hear about so many studies that tell you to do one thing, and then, frankly, your book is telling us, you know what, that's really not true. What's a poor non-scientist to do?
Yeah, you're right about that, because so often you'll see these headlines that say, this is the answer, coffee's bad for you, coffee's good for you. When one of the things I do is I always invite people to remember there's a body of evidence out there. And especially when you're talking about something like health, it's never going to be one study. It's never going to be, one animal study in particular. You have to talk about a body of evidence. So always ask yourself, what kind of evidence are they using to make this claim? And I give people sort of a checklist of things that they can go through, like, is it an animal study? Is it just an observational study? Is it a small study? If it's any of those kinds of things, it's not going to be definitive. And always remember there's this body of evidence that is sort of nudging us in the right direction, and that's probably what you should follow.
Well, I got to hand it to you. Whoever comes up with the titles of your books is doing a heck of a good job, because I don't know if it was the last one or the one before, The Science of Celebrity or Why Gwyneth Paltrow is Wrong About Everything. That was a catchy title, and so is this one, Relax, Dammit, a user's guide to the age of anxiety, which has brought Timothy Caulfield to our virtual studio tonight from the University of Alberta. Tim, good to see you again, and thanks as always.
Thanks so much for having me on, Steve. Really enjoyed it.
And that is the agenda for Wednesday, January 6, 2021. The province this week pledged to ramp up the vaccination rollout. Tomorrow we'll explore why some may be hesitant and what public health has to say in reply. Also, we'll hear from both sides in the battle over development in or near the Greenbelt. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
The Agenda is always on. To catch up on conversations from this week or any week, visit our website, tvo.org/theagenda, or our YouTube page at youtube.com/theagenda. It's all there for whenever you want to watch.